Well, good afternoon. First off, I just want to commend the excellent work of the Missouri House Democratic Caucus. This team has done an incredible job so far this session. Every single day, I'm proud to have these people standing here today with me in the fight to make life more affordable for working Missouri families. Being in the minority is not easy, but this team does not give up, and I am so incredibly grateful for that. And through their hard work, we are laying a solid foundation this session for our numbers for the next session to be even stronger, an even stronger force for advocating for working Missourians. And given the things the majority party is trying to pull, Missouri families are going to need more voices here in the Capitol who actually care about the challenges they are facing. We are in the midst of a budget crisis, largely because of the irresponsible elimination of the capital gains tax last year. As a result, the majority party are cutting numerous services that Missourians rely on. They are underfunding K-12 public education while shifting more taxpayer money to private schools and trying to institute a sweeping overhaul of how we fund public colleges and universities on the fly with no public discussion until this week, and no apparent consideration for the consequences that could force some campuses to close. Yet the majority party's response to the revenue shortfall they created is to double down with more tax cuts for the wealthy while shifting the tax burden to middle and low-income Missourians with a massive sales tax hike on everything they buy. In fact, today, we spent less time debating the sales tax hike plan than we did debating whether or not Waymo and autonomous vehicles are going to be on our roads. While Democrats work for affordability, Republicans are pushing as hard as they can in the opposite direction. And while Republicans might be able to jam this through the legislature because majority lawmakers are too afraid to buck the governor, that doesn't mean a massive sales tax hike is popular in the real world. If this ends up on the ballot, there is little doubt it will go down in a lopsided defeat. I am happy to take your questions now.
Representative Ani, this morning the speaker said that this session's had some of the most bipartisan efforts that he's seen in all of his 8 years. Do you share that sentiment?
Well, listen, I would say that every single year in this legislature, the things that get covered more often than not are the things that divide us. But so often we do have the opportunity to sit down and vote yes on a good bipartisan piece of legislation. What I would say is that, yes, I do appreciate the working relationship that our caucus has had with the majority party, with their leadership. I do think that that has overall been some of the more positive, relationally experiences that I've had in this building since I've been here. That said, we are in an election year, and what we see from the majority party is a hyper-focus on the things that divide Missourians. We are spending time worried about where people pee. We are not spending time trying to lower costs for Missourians. And those are the things that, when the speaker points to bipartisanship, I just can't help but remind everyone that there is another side to that coin, and the other side to that is hyper-partisanship, and that is most of what we have to spend our time on in this building, which is unfortunate, and it does a huge disservice to the average Missourian.
If I wanted to ask about the juvenile bill that was passed first, actually our other reporter is working on that right now, but I wonder if there's any additional comments that people wanted to say about that bill, and considering it's pretty quick track from last week to through this week.
Yeah, I will start, and then I'm certain I have some colleagues who would love to weigh in. I will start by saying that just from a process perspective, and listen, I know that legislative process is boring, but it is worth noting that this Senate bill was rushed through the Senate in the dead of night. It was done so while Senator Roberts was deployed overseas serving his country, knowing that he was the main opposition to the legislation. It was then sent over to the House and rushed through the process here. And it is so far-reaching. It touches so many pieces of our criminal justice system, and it is absolutely going to affect the children in our state who get caught up in the judicial system. It aims to incarcerate more Missourians, and it comes with a nearly $1 billion fiscal note. That is so egregious. It is so frustrating to watch this process play out over and over again for the super minority party in this building to get run over time after time. These are the reasons that I continue to say we need more balance in this legislature. We need more roadblocks to some of the worst ideas that come out of the majority party. And with that, I'm more than happy to let one or two of my colleagues speak on it. David Tyson Smith, you said some stuff on the floor, and I think that you would have something to add.
Yeah, and I'll be brief. I mean, first of all, as Representative Ani said, it was reprehensible what they did with this bill. Moving this bill through that fast, it's too big of a bill with too many moving parts to do that. You don't move a massive bill through the building like that. It touched on so many areas, far-reaching areas, juveniles, sentencing. It completely transformed sentencing for people on all kinds of levels, not just minimum incarceration times, but the juvenile piece. One, we're getting prosecutors involved where they have no business getting involved. Prosecutors are elected officials, and they're going to be pressured to go after juveniles. If there's a high-profile crime involving a juvenile, the voters are going to want the prosecutor to get involved. And he's probably going to do it when he has no business doing it. And we heard on the floor, well, juveniles aren't in jails, they're not in cages. Well, I can tell you as an attorney, I've gone into these rooms where I don't even think there's windows. Some of these kids are locked in rooms, and they have shackles on. And I've seen a mother hear her child say, "Hi, Mommy," just a kid for doing something that's not even that serious. Okay, this is wrong. And there needs to be a better process for this. This is not right. And, I only have I'll be here for an hour talking about all the components of this bill. It was too fast, and too fast is wrong in this building. Thank you.
Representative Black talked about how, he predicted perhaps this would eventually lessen sentences because judges wouldn't be as inclined to give longer sentences given that there's a minimum term. How do you respond to that?
I don't agree with that. I mean, I understand the logic behind what he was saying. In other words, if he feels like judges might, they don't know exactly how much time someone is going to serve, and so they think it's going to be a lower amount, so they give a higher sentence. But that's not always the case. Oftentimes, you'll have situations where the attorney is wanting probation, and the prosecutor is wanting prison. And if the person gets prison, they're going to be in jail longer. This is not going to lower sentences in any capacity. The only time it would have any type of positive effect is if both parties agreed on something and they knew what the sentence they wanted the person to get. But other than that, they're going to serve more time.
Representative, you said that if prosecutors get involved, voters would want them to get involved. So does that not prove that there is voter support for these kinds of measures?
No, because the problem is a lot of times when you have elected officials, you have these people that want, incarcerations. They want convictions. But the issue is if you look at the prosecutor's manual, see, they're not supposed to seek convictions. They're supposed to seek justice. And sometimes prosecutors, they get power hungry and they get in office and they want convictions. So that's not right. Even if the people want a lot of convictions, they're supposed to seek justice. And it's not right for children who don't have a voice, by the way, to be locked up when they shouldn't be.
Just a few years ago, we did a lot of debate about criminal justice reform, and it actually led to Governor Parsons celebrating the closure of a prison in the state. I get your thoughts on what you think has happened in the intervening years to kind of flip that policy on its head.
So this is a problem. So after the George Floyd situation, there was all this criminal justice reform at the circuit level, municipalities, but we've seen an edging of that back slowly as the years go on. They're constantly trying to roll back all these reforms, and we see constant bills doing this. The Hovis bill, which was kind of part of this bill, adds penalties if you have prior convictions, not incarcerations, which was not in the original transparency of sentencing bill. So yeah, since the George Floyd passing, we had the massive reform, but over the years, we've seen just a kind of a creeping back to the way things were. It's not right.
So something else that the House passed this week, and this might be for you, Representative Woods, is the ballot summary redo. We're back at that again. And I asked Speaker Patterson this morning about that and the constitutionality of it, but she responded that they took out the portion that was struck down. They spoke on the new language that only allows circuit courts, but it seems like he's not super concerned. Are you concerned about the constitutionality of that new ability for only the circuit courts to rewrite?
Yeah, I'm very concerned, and I said as much on the floor that what that bill did was strip away not only the power of appellate courts, but the power of the Supreme Courts to ultimately give relief in the form of rewriting ballot language. And it feels like a basic constitutional principle and a separation of powers issues that you can't do that. I mean, not being a lawyer, not being a judge, but saying that the highest court in the land doesn't have a power to grant that kind of relief in a case like that, it's pretty clearly unconstitutional.
Representative Bonney, there was a lot of, during the debate on the income tax resolution, there seemed to be two arguments that Democrats were making simultaneously. One, that it would create an $8 billion revenue hole, and at the other hand, it would also drastically raise sales tax. Square those two together. How can an increased sales tax make an $8 billion hole?
That's a great question. So let's start with the sales tax piece, because the resolution explicitly says that it will allow legislators, paraphrasing, to impose a sales tax increase on any goods and services. Okay. Let's put a pin in that, because that's explicitly what it says. But what the Republicans are leading with is a gradual elimination of the income tax. And so that elimination is what so they're seeking approval from the voters for both things. The income tax elimination will come first, but that sales tax hike is the only solution to recoup those dollars. Now, here's the concern. There are a lot of them, but here's one concern. That the gradual elimination of the income tax will be what puts that giant hole in our budget. And if the voters approve this in November, what will happen is it hamstrings a future General Assembly who is going to be looking at these dwindling revenues. They are going to be looking at cutting even more vital services for Missourians, and they are going to be forced to be the legislators to raise taxes on Missourians. And as I look around the building, my colleagues, all the Republican supermajority, what I can tell you is there aren't too many of them that are really excited about raising people's taxes very often, or at least will admit to it. But what they are doing in this piece of legislation, in this resolution, is absolutely giving power to a future General Assembly to raise sales taxes. Unfortunately, there are no details in the bill about what that will be. So we can only assume that they will have to raise sales taxes high enough to cover that $9 billion deficit.
So one of the things that it says in it, though, is that those sales taxes can only be implemented if it is expressly stated by the General Assembly that it is for lowering the income tax. So it wouldn't just be a blanket sales tax increase if it's specifically targeted for this. That you seem to be leaving out the part where it says specifically it's for the sales, or it's to lower the income tax.
Whatever their reasoning is to raise sales taxes, they want to raise sales taxes. Just because it is for the purpose of eliminating the income tax doesn't mean that they're not going to raise the sales taxes. I mean, I just don't know how else you read this bill. It is a sales tax increase. The Nonpartisan Missouri Budget Project has told us explicitly it will raise taxes on 4 out of 5 Missourians. It's not just raising sales tax rates either. I think we should be very clear about that. We're expanding they will have to expand the base. There is no universe in which just raising sales taxes a few percent on what's already taxed is going to make up for that $9 billion deficit. So what's going to have to happen is we are going to have to impose sales taxes on services like childcare, healthcare, real estate services, ag services, you name it, we are going to be taxed on it here in Missouri.
There was some acrimony at the end of that debate from the sponsor in part saying that, the claims were lies. And I guess I'm curious reconciling that with, the technicality of, yes, this bill doesn't raise sales taxes, but it's giving that authority. I mean, I guess kind of how do you take the attitude at the end of that, of this kind of a defensiveness over this?
Listen, I mean, if I was being pressured from the governor to vote on this bill, I would be coming up with my own excuses as to why I was voting yes on this bill too. And if they have to lie to themselves about what they are doing to the Missouri public, that's on them. But what this bill does is it will raise sales taxes on Missourians, full stop.
You mentioned on the floor you don't think the ballot language will stand. Can you expound on why?
Absolutely. Great question. So the ballot language, instead of saying that it is going to raise taxes on Missourians, it says it's going to modernize our taxes. And I find that laughable because it is a regressive tax that they are proposing. And the most frustrating piece of this is how they are trying to bait and switch Missourians. As usual, they've written ballot language that makes it sound flowery and wonderful, and they're trying to get folks to vote yes. But that's not what this is. It is not modernizing. It is a regressive sales tax. It will hurt working Missourians. It will hurt seniors, and it's disingenuous. And I absolutely believe that the courts are going to step in and say, no, thank you.
So the first bill passed, that wasn't the supplemental, was the legislation that removes legal barriers for pregnant women to get divorce. I know that was your bill at one point. I mean, what are your thoughts on that being the first bill that's not supplemental, kind of the tone you think that might set for other legislation that's going to go through?
Yeah, I mean, I am so incredibly proud that that bill is going to the governor's desk. When we talk about the bipartisan work that we get to do in this building, I think that is a shining example of how we can come together, both parties, and do something that is good for Missourians. As far as setting a tone, I think that you could see it that way. I think that my interpretation of why that bill was TAFP'd on Tuesday is because that was also the day that we perfected HJR 173 and 174 in the House. And I would guess that the majority party appreciated the distraction from that headline on that day. Again, it's an election year. There are going to be partisan politics played at every level, and while I am so very grateful for that bipartisan work, I'll also remind folks that I carried that bill for 2 years and it never even made it out of committee. In fact, the first year it didn't even get referred. So, it is a partisan game. If I was still the only carrier of that bill, it would not be going to the governor's desk. But there's a Republican carrying it now, and I'm very grateful for her work, but that's how it works in this building.
Representative, earlier today, Jackson County, the circuit court out of there, said that the redrawn congressional map, the Missouri First map, was constitutionally drawn. Do you have any reaction to that?
No, I haven't seen that. I don't have a reaction at this time. I can maybe comment later, but I need to read details.
So far, it feels like there's quite a few ballot initiatives that have either gone through the building or are being proposed. The income tax, the one on Medicaid work requirements. I know there's one that was heard this week redoing Missouri's court plan for Supreme Court judges. I guess thoughts on the amount of things that Missouri voters are going to have to vote on in November, even if those don't make it on. It feels like there's a lot of those.
Great question, because you're right. There are likely to be a lot of questions being asked of voters this November. And I think that ballot fatigue is something that is very real and something we should be concerned about. The idea that, folks already have to take time out of their busy lives to go cast their vote and exercise that constitutional right. But folks have limited time, and it takes time to research these ballot initiatives. It takes time to research the candidates on a ballot. I make a cheat sheet for myself every year. I write it down. I know exactly how I'm going to vote, but I do my research beforehand. And what a privilege it is that I have time and space to do that. That is not the case for every Missourian. And oftentimes, when we put ballot language in front of folks, and that's part of my frustration with the ballot language around the sales tax increase, is that it's disingenuous and it could confuse voters, right? If we're trying to pull the wool over their eyes. And so I am concerned that Missourians may not get to the end of their ballot. They may not turn their ballot over. They may just not vote on everything because they're not sure, or maybe they didn't have time to research that one specific issue. But it is a concern, and it's a big burden on Missouri voters.
Two more. One, property taxes, that was obviously Representative Taylor's bill passed through with quite a lot of bipartisan support. Senators say that property taxes are a priority for them, so that might go through. But there was another half to that bill that is now being held by Representative Keithley. This might be for either one of you, but the fact that it hasn't been brought up yet, and that deals a lot of the election, moving things like to November, for instance. I guess one, on the priority of it, maybe of Taylor's bill versus the fact that Keithley's hasn't moved too far yet.
Representative Simon?
Well, as you probably heard, when we passed through Taylor's bill, we did all support it, but we do have a concern about the piece that has to do, tied to the foundation formula, the minimum tax levy. And I will say, behind the scenes, there's still been continuing conversations on that. It would not surprise me at all if there's a change in that in the Senate. May or may not be eliminating it, but I think we are interested in maybe changing some language there, both sides. Then we have Keithley's bill, which, in my opinion, didn't get as many positive things in that bill as I would say Taylor's did when it got divided up. And I speculate that it's the November 14th November date. It's the November election date that I think is what is making it stall. I can only guess that maybe they don't know that they have the votes for it. That's about all I can say on that.
Any expectations for the second half of the session?
Well, we are still, considering some new bills. We voted out a bill today. Today. And it was the Democrat bill. I call it the Democrat bill. It has my name and Representative Job's name on it, but it was the Democrats on the committee that came together and put forth some solutions that we could all agree to. And we were really pleased with the response that we got from the committee, and that passed out unanimously today. And we're hoping that will end up being potentially added to some legislation. And then there's a lot of other bills on property tax out there. But we're starting to see some of those ideas in the beginning that we were very concerned about are slowly starting to go away. So I think we're becoming happier and happier with the results that could happen out of property tax.
And then there are the expectations for the second half of the session.
So I anticipate, again, it's an election year, so I anticipate that we will continue to be forced to deal with things that we disagree on more than we agree on, things that, are aimed to make people look a certain way in an election year. Very frustrating. But I think my concern about this session so far will continue into the second half of session, which is that things have been moving very efficiently. They've been moving very quickly. Things have been very busy. And, I think that does speak to the, where Republican leadership is, how well they're working together, how well they're working with the executive branch. And I think that, one concern of mine is that, it's kind of everything everywhere all at once. And when you're in a super minority, it's often you're just playing defense all the time and you're trying to determine what is the most important thing to focus on. And that just becomes kind of a slog, especially in the last half of session. So, like I said, I'm so proud of this team. We're going to continue, providing not only the most robust defense we can against some of the worst ideas that we see here, but we're going to continue doing what Representative Steinhoff just described, which is presenting our own ideas and saying, here's where we think we can, come together on, and here's how our party views the solution to this problem. So I look forward to continuing that, and I look forward to this team continuing to work really, really hard.
Okay, one more, I'm so sorry. Representative Vogel, thoughts on the budget processes? We're about to probably do that as soon as you guys get back.
Yeah, so we marked up the state budget yesterday in the budget committee. Notably, the biggest concerns for me remain not fully funding the foundation formula. We're underfunding it currently to the tune of $190 million. The repeal of $51 million for a child care subsidy program in the language that prevents us, I should say the governor, from making good on his promise to pay on enrollment and not attendance, something that child care providers across the state have been counting on for the last year since the governor promised that in his inaugural State of the State. Representative Ani mentioned the higher education new funding formula. Our caucus remains concerned that the winners and losers in that new model are so drastic that it will force some of our 2 years and 4 years to close their doors. And we will continue to be at the table for conversations about how to make that better if we're allowed. There were some other things in the budget, good wins for my budget team. I'm really proud of the work we did yesterday, and we look forward to marking up the budget, taking the final step as we return from spring break.
On that, what was the reason for the $2 million cut for Family Resource Centers?
I think the chair would say that he was had to make cuts, and apparently he felt like that was an appropriate place to do so. I know I had a member, Representative Kimberly Ann Collins, who had an amendment to restore that. I will give the chair credit. It sounded like in the budget hearing room yesterday, he noted that that was an area that he would like to see change as we move to the floor. And I know myself and my caucus are committed to restoring those funds for children in foster care across our state. Any other questions for me?
All right, anything else? All right, thank y'all. Have a great week.